I don't know the date anymore. The radios haven't worked in weeks. The last calendar I saw had March circled 3 times in red. We're well past that now. They say it's been over a year since it all began. Since the first missiles. Since the silence that followed. We've stopped calling it a war. Now, we just call it what's left. When the Kaliningrad strike happened, when Russia used the tactical nuke to turn a NATO column into glass, there were still rules. Lines not to cross. Thresholds we swore we wouldn't step over. That was months ago. Those lines, they're gone. Now it's just smoke and stories. The old alliances are dead. NATO never officially collapsed, but command fractured. Orders came slower, then came in different languages, then stopped entirely. France pulled out first, quietly, then Germany. Then Hungary made their own defensive alliance. Poland screamed into the void. The U.S. stayed, but its focus shifted. Defensive posture only. No more deployments. No more risks. We were told to hold terrain. No one said what terrain. Or for how long. By then, our squad wasn't a squad anymore. Just 5 of us. Me. Matthias. Monroe, somehow still alive. Kari, the Estonian comms tech who hadn't spoken in days. And a guy named Vogel, a German logistics runner with hollow eyes and a limp. We weren't stationed anymore. We just existed. Scavenging food from frozen outposts. Trading fuel for warmth. Listening to static and calling it news. We'd holed up in a burned-out school in southwest Poland, about 40 kilometers from Rocklau. The place still had a working boiler. We guarded it like it was a nuclear warhead. One night, Monroe came in soaked with rain, holding a crumpled note she'd pulled off a courier's body. Just coordinates. A date. A NATO cipher still being used by someone. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me like we both knew what this was. The last mission. We left that morning. Didn't pack much. Didn't tell anyone. Just walked west. Through fields of frozen soil and ash-coated trees. Through towns where the only movement came from wind-blown doors and dogs without masters. The roads were empty, except for wrecks. Some civilian, some military. Some burned so clean you couldn't tell the difference anymore. No uniforms. No flags. Just the dust of things once organized. 3 days into the journey, we hit the outskirts of Opole. And that's where we saw the first flag. It wasn't NATO, or Russian, or anything official. It was white, painted on the side of an apartment building. Underneath it, someone had written, "We're done fighting." The building had people. Maybe a dozen. Civilians, former soldiers, kids. They didn't ask who we were. They didn't care. They gave us hot tea and a quiet place to sleep. The next morning, we asked if they needed anything. A woman with one arm said, "Need? No. Want? To never hear boots again." So we left. By day 5, the weather changed. Heavy skies. Rain that smelled like rust. Monroe said it reminded her of Donetsk in the early days. I didn't ask how she survived that. She didn't offer. On the 6th night, we made camp in the remains of an old NATO comms tower. The wiring was stripped. Antennas bent. But the roof held. Vogel found a crate of expired MREs and a half-empty bottle of disinfectant. We counted that as a win. That night, Monroe opened up. She told us what she really knew. The coordinates. They pointed to an old satellite relay bunker used by NATO during the early stages of the war, back when air superiority was still a thing. Now, it was nothing but a forgotten hill of concrete and wire. Except something was broadcasting from it again. Encrypted, rhythmic, not SOS, not command code. Just a pulse. "Whatever's down there," she said, "someone wants it buried." That was enough for me. Not because I cared what it was, but because it was something to do. Something real. When the world falls apart, even bad orders feel like purpose. We reached the site just after sunset on day 8. A shallow ridge. A steel hatch half covered in moss and wet soil. No guards, no sounds. Kari tried the satellite reader. The pulse was still going. Same frequency. Same tempo. Vogel stared at the entrance and muttered, "We're not coming back from this, are we?" No one answered. We opened the hatch. The smell hit first. Dust, ozone, something chemical beneath it. Inside, stairs. Metal, cold, slippery with condensation. We went down. 5 floors. No resistance. Until the generator room. It was active. Low power. Minimal lights. But someone had been there recently. Coffee grounds. A journal in Cyrillic. And something worse, a sealed containment locker. With US and Russian markings. Side by side. Kari opened the log. Monroe cursed. Joint tech, experimental. Portable yield manipulator. Part of the Kaliningrad Doctrine. A bomb. Or a piece of one. Or something worse. An unfinished prototype that didn't belong to either side anymore. And that's when the motion sensors pinged. Footsteps. Topside. We had 2 choices. Leave it or destroy it. I didn't even wait for the vote. We wired it, primed it, and ran. The hillside erupted behind us. Not nuclear, but bright enough to blind whoever was coming. They wouldn't find anything useful now. Just ruin. We didn't talk for hours. Just kept walking. Away from everything. Later, in a half-collapsed barn outside Legnica, Monroe finally spoke. That was the last loose thread. We just burned it. And then she added, almost like an afterthought, "You know what the worst part is? I don't think it mattered." She was right. The war isn't over. Not officially. But no one's advancing. No one's sending tanks. No one's counting anymore. Just holding, hiding, waiting. And we're still walking. Still breathing. Still trying to remember what comes after survival. We found a working vehicle outside Zielona Gora. Half submerged in mud, battery shot, 2 windows cracked but intact. Vogel got it running with a field charger and a prayer. We didn't ask where it came from. didn't ask who had left it. There was blood on the passenger seat and dog tags in the glove box. We buried both. Drove east. No destination. No orders. Just distance. By now the roads are ruled by no one. There's no front line. No supply lines. Just scattered pockets of command, still pretending the war's alive because they're afraid of what comes after. We passed 4 checkpoints in 3 days. 2 of them were manned by people with no insignia. Just rifles and desperation. One of them asked for our allegiance. Monroe said nothing. Just stared until they waved us through. That's what the uniform gets you now. Fear, distrust, maybe a second glance. But never answers. We stopped in a town whose name was painted over. People still lived there. Dozens, maybe more. Kids, old men, some who looked like they'd once worn fatigues and now wore aprons. A man approached us while we refueled at the pump station. "You're late," he said. None of us responded. They already left, 3 nights ago. Said NATO was dissolving. Said Russia blinked first, but it didn't matter. Then he handed us a jar of preserved fruit. Said nothing else. We didn't ask who they were. Didn't matter anymore. That night, we stayed in what used to be a fire station. Kari found a shortwave transmitter still wired into the roof. She patched it into the truck's battery, dialed through dead bands, and hit a strange, repeating tone. Almost a song. Faint, distant, like a lullaby trying to reach across a dying sky. For the first time in weeks, I dreamed. Not of battles, not of orders, but of silence. And a field of sunflowers growing through a tank's hull. When I woke up, Monroe was gone. So was her pack, her boots, her rifle. She left only a note. "I'm not done yet, but you don't need to follow this part." Mateus stared at it for a long time, then folded it and put it in his coat. We didn't go after her. By the end of that week, we reached the old Poznan airfield. It had once been NATO's northern logistics artery. Now, just rust and birds. But there were people there. And more importantly, food. Bartered by silence and service. We traded gear for shelter. Taught a few farmers how to use an old water purifier. Rigged solar panels to light a hospital basement. No one asked us to stay. But they fed us like we belonged. Kari started mapping the dead frequencies again. She found voices barely audible transmissions from deep in former Russian sectors. Nothing coherent. Just human tones. A woman praying. A child reciting numbers. A cough. She recorded it all. Said she wanted to remember that the world hadn't stopped speaking, even if no one was listening anymore. On the 14th day at the airfield, an old man gave me a coat. Worn leather, bullet hole in the shoulder. "I used to wear the other kind too," he said. But one day I looked down and realized the uniform didn't mean anything anymore. I haven't worn mine since. Not out of shame. Not out of pride. But because no one salutes ghosts. And that's what we are now. One night, Matthias asked if we'd won. I didn't know what to say. So I said the truth. No one wins a war like this. They just run out of things to lose. He didn't reply. Just tossed another log on the fire and sat beside me in the quiet. That same night, I burned my ID tags. Tossed them into the coals and watched them hiss. I don't know why. Maybe to feel lighter. Maybe because names don't matter in the ruins. Maybe because the war didn't kill me, but it killed who I was. Now we plant things. Wires, crops, warnings, ideas. We patch roofs and radios. Fix broken wheels and old fences. We teach children how to start fires that don't burn people. And for the first time, I don't dream of battles. I dream of nothing. And in a world like this, that's a kind of peace. Somewhere around month 13, we stopped hearing gunfire at night. Not because peace had arrived. Just because there was no one left nearby to fire. The world didn't come back all at once. It didn't come back at all, really. It just shifted. From war to something. After. Not peace. Just less dying. In the days that followed Monroe's departure, the world got quieter. Not safer. Just quieter. No more sat feeds. No more battlefield updates. No more forward units. No more flags. Just whispers. Ceasefire in the Danube corridor. Turkey closed its borders. U.S. troops pulled out of Bavaria. Kaliningrad. Silent for months. But no announcements. No treaties. No press conferences. Just a war dying without a funeral. We stayed in Poznan longer than we meant to. It felt less like a post, more like a place to wait out the end. I helped a retired dentist fix a solar water heater. Mateusz taught kids how to field strip rifles they'd never have to use. Kari built a garden in an old bus chassis. We weren't soldiers anymore. We weren't civilians either. We were residue. One morning, a small convoy arrived. Unmarked trucks, civilian plates. Inside, 2 men in suits and a case full of paper. They weren't military. Not anymore. But they carried authority, or at least the illusion of it. They called it the Accord. Pages and pages of preamble and proposals. Not a treaty. Not even a ceasefire. Just a document that everyone refused to sign, but no one wanted to tear up. It had a name. Framework for Long-Term Cessation of Hostilities. Which is how bureaucrats say we're too tired to keep dying. They asked us to disarm the checkpoint outside the city. Said it was time to let commerce move again. Commerce. As if anyone was buying anything anymore. Still, we did it. Took down the coils. Cut the wire. Dug up the mines. No one clapped. No one cheered. We just stared at the empty road and felt vulnerable. That night, a boy passed through the gate with a dog and a cardboard sign that said, "Looking for my uncle." We let him through. Didn't check his back. Didn't ask questions. Because hope in this world is more dangerous than explosives. And rarer. A week later, a British officer in civilian clothes came looking for Kari. He said he represented something called the Pan-European Stabilization Collective. Another new name. Another flag no one would fly. He asked her to join a communications rebuild team. Kari said yes. Didn't pack much. Just her map of dead frequencies and a jar of sunflower seeds she'd been saving. She didn't say goodbye. Just nodded. Matheus stayed with me. Said he didn't trust anyone else to keep the fires going. He'd grown quieter, but also stronger. Sometimes I'd catch him laughing with the kids. And for a moment, I'd believe the world might actually survive this. One morning, we woke to the sound of a helicopter. First one in months. No markings. No weapons visible. It passed low, scanned the old university rooftops, then banked east and disappeared. We didn't wave. We didn't run. We just stood in the street and watched it go, like seeing a memory float away. I found Monroe again, or at least, I heard about her. A trader from the Czech border told me there was a woman leading cleanup ops near the Kaliningrad buffer zone. No uniform, but she walked like a soldier. Gave orders like one too. He said she carried a dog tag with no name. Just the NATO crest burned into it. I smiled. That sounded like her. Later, I asked Matheus what he'd do if someone rebuilt NATO. He stared off toward the hills and said, "If they build it, it better be for the right war next time." Then he went back to teaching a girl how to patch a canvas tarp. That's how the war ends. Not in a broadcast. Not in a signature. Not in a mushroom cloud. Just in people deciding they don't want to bleed anymore. And deciding, maybe, not to let someone else bleed for them either. There are still skirmishes out there. Still cities in blackout. Still radiation zones. Still soldiers who don't know it's over. But in our part of the world, it's ending. Not because of orders. Because of exhaustion. And because people have finally begun to say, enough. It's been well over a year now. The shooting has mostly stopped. But nothing feels still. Not really. We've entered the phase the politicians call stabilization. But it's not stability. It's just tiredness with a uniform on. We've stopped pretending the borders are intact. There's no Poland anymore, not as it was. No Germany. No Lithuania. Just patches. Some guarded by local militias. Some ruled by mayors who were once janitors. Some forgotten altogether. Poznan, where we settled, now calls itself a free urban republic. Sounds grand. Really, it's just 50,000 people trying not to die. But they've got clean water now. And they're building greenhouses. Real ones. With glass. And soil that's been tested and cleared. It's the closest thing to hope I've seen since the sirens first wailed. We still don't talk about the first year. Not out loud. No one wants to recount the body counts. No one wants to relive Kaliningrad. Or the camps. Or the vanishings. Instead, we talk about irrigation. Fuel purification. Barter networks. Education. Survival stuff. The weirdest part? The generators don't hum at night anymore. The quiet is deafening. It used to mean danger. Now it just means we're still here. Mathieu's built a stove from scrap. Runs on wood pellets. Smokes like hell, but it bakes decent bread. Sometimes we give loaves to the refugee kids who camp outside the city wall. Sometimes they give us herbs in return. It's not currency, it's acknowledgement. One afternoon, a vehicle rolled into town. Armored. Tidy, not hostile. It carried a team from what used to be the European Parliament. They wore suits that didn't fit anymore and offered pamphlets about a post-conflict continental accord. It had bullet points, charts, a future. People took them. They even nodded. But the moment the trucks left, someone used the papers to insulate the greenhouse walls. I understood. You can't print trust. Not after what we lived through. Kari sent a message from the rebuilt relay near Vilnius. She's part of a civil communications team now. They're laying new fiber through the dead zones, trying to reconnect sectors without triggering new fights. She ended her note with, "We're not fixing anything, just reconnecting the broken. That has to be enough." I keep her message in my coat, next to Monroe's note. And a flattened bullet I pulled from my vest a lifetime ago. The war is gone, but we're still armed with its echoes. A nearby town started building a wall, not to keep enemies out, to keep the war out. They're walling off the past, brick by brick. They call it the quiet ring. Inside it, no weapons, no uniforms, no radios. They invited me to join. I declined, not because I don't believe in it, but because I'm not ready yet. Mathieu said something to me the other day that I haven't been able to shake. We were watching the sky turn gold over the tree line, a pot of stew bubbling beside us. He said, "What do you do when peace feels like you're deserting the dead?" I didn't have an answer. Still don't. Sometimes I walk to the old airstrip, just to hear the wind whip through the fencing. To see the hangars where soldiers used to dream of rotations that never came. To feel the weight of a silence I earned. Not everyone made it, but I did. And I have to make that mean something. The world didn't go back to what it was. It never will. But it's trying to be something. Even if that something looks like soup kitchens in churches, goats grazing on once-mined hills, and children asking what NATO used to stand for. I tell them it stood for trying. Sometimes failing. But trying anyway. And that's enough. I hadn't planned on leaving Poznan. Not again. But then I got a message scratched into the side of an empty fuel drum, left in the shell of burned-out roadside depot. South, near the Red Towers. She's still there. No name. But I knew who they meant. It had been months since Monroe vanished into the haze. She left us without goodbye, just coordinates and a purpose we never fully understood. And now someone wanted me to find her. Or at least, see how her part ended. I packed light. Half a canteen of water. A .38 with 4 rounds. Dried bread. Kari's map. A coil of copper wire for barter or repairs. Mateus didn't ask where I was going. Just handed me an old rain poncho and said, "Come back different, not broken." The red towers were what locals called the burnt-out high-rises in Katowice. Once full of offices, now twisted metal and ash. But beneath them a network of tunnels, old transit lines, bomb shelters, and something newer. The trip took 5 days. I passed 5 settlements. 3 of them still stood. 2 were just scorched memories. Everywhere I went, people asked the same question. Is it really over? I never gave them a straight answer, because I didn't have one. I found the towers at sunset, red against the horizon, crumbling. Still, there was a flag tied between 2 rebar beams. Faded black, no insignia. Painted on it. We remember. Below the towers, I found a bunker entrance. Guarded. 2 figures with salvage rifles and thick coats. One of them saw me and called back into the dark. A moment later, she stepped out. Monroe. Thinner. Older. But unmistakably her. She didn't smile. Just nodded like she'd been expecting me. "Still breathing," she said. I laughed. We didn't hug. We're not that kind of people. Inside the bunker, they'd built something strange. Not a military outpost. Not a village. A record. Walls covered in maps. Timelines. Photos. Voice recordings looped on salvaged speakers. Pieces of uniforms. Letters. Weapon fragments tagged and dated. A museum. Or maybe a shrine. To the war. To the dead. To what it cost. She called it the archive. "If they're going to rebuild the world," she said, "they should know what it took to ruin it." We spent 3 nights there. I helped wire solar cells. Sorted through recovered notes from Lviv, Riga, Radom. I found my own name in a half-burned ledger. Polish sector temporary assignment. Last known location, lost. That felt about right. On the 4th day, Monroe asked if I'd stay. Said they needed people who remembered. Who could explain. Who hadn't gone numb. I told her I'd think about it. And I meant it. But when I woke the next morning, I knew I couldn't. Not yet. I left before sunrise. Left her a note on the workbench. "You remember for all of us. I'll try to make sure they have something to remember." The walk back was slower. Because I wasn't rushing away from a war anymore. I was walking into whatever was left of a life. Along the way, I met a man who claimed he was rebuilding a rail line. Another who wanted to start a school in an old brewery. A woman who believed the soil would heal faster if we sang to it. Crazy? Maybe. But after what we've seen, hope is the only madness worth keeping. When I got back to Poznan, everything was quieter. Cleaner. Someone had painted over the war slogans on the wall. It just said, "Still here." Mateus was teaching a teenager how to make soap. He didn't ask how it went. Didn't need to. He just nodded and tossed me a piece of dried meat. We sat by the fire. Didn't say a word. That's how we heal now. Not with speeches. Not with justice. Just with presence. And time. and the silence that comes after you've made peace with your ghosts. The war ended. Not with parades, not with treaties, not even with silence. Just absence. The kind that creeps in slowly. The kind you don't notice until someone asks, "When did the fighting stop?" And you realize you can't remember the last time you heard a bomb. We live differently now. We live, though. And that word means something again. In the city, someone planted trees. Saplings, birch and ash. Right in the center of the old intersection where the tanks once rolled through. People hang notes from them. Not prayers, not names, just memories. This is where I lost him. She made it to here. I was here. I survived. Some nights I walk there after curfew. Run my hand along the bark. Read the notes. Sometimes add one. I don't sign them. Mateus built a distillery. Not for alcohol. For clean water. He says it feels better to create something that keeps people alive. He hasn't spoken about the early months in over a year. He doesn't need to. It's in his eyes. In the way he checks rooftops without thinking. And how he always sits facing the door. We don't talk about NATO anymore. Or Russia. Or flags. Those were systems. And systems died in the dark. People didn't. Not all of us. Kari visited last month. Brought seeds. And a working radio. She said the Baltic states are trying to form a communications union, not a government. Just a way to talk across the broken places. She asked if we wanted to help. I said yes. Not because I believed in it, but because connection matters. Even if it's just static and hope. I still carry Monroe's note. Still have my boots, though they're more patched than leather now. I never picked up a new rifle. I haven't needed one. That's not peace. It's something quieter. And maybe that's enough. Last winter, we buried a girl who died of an old infection. No ceremony. No words. Just a marker that read, "She made it this far." That line stuck with me. I think it'll be my epitaph too someday. He made it this far. Because survival isn't glory. It's not victory. It's not medals or headlines. It's choosing to keep going. Even when you're tired. Even when you're haunted. Even when no one remembers what the war was even about anymore. I don't know what comes next. But I know what came before. And I carry it not like a burden, but like a compass made of grief and fire. Because what we lived through, it matters. And even if the world forgets, I won't. This is how I survived the end of World War III. Not with a weapon. Not with vengeance. Not by waiting for peace to be handed to me. But by building something worth living for in the ashes. And if the world burns again, I'll plant something in the smoke.